A millionaire raised his cook's salary after finding out she was a virgin. The young woman from a humble background feels uncomfortable with the unexpected raise. The millionaire discovers the young woman's true essence and begins to question his own choices. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Stay tuned. The golden light of sunset streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Alexander Blackwood's penthouse office, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor. From the 68th floor of the Blackwood Tower in downtown Boston, he could see the entire city spread out before him like a glittering carpet. This was his domain, his empire, Blackwood Enterprises, a financial and real estate conglomerate worth billions. Alexander leaned back in his Italian leather chair, swirling the amber liquid in his crystal tumbler. Another successful day. Another multi-million-dollar deal closed. Another empty victory. "Mr. Blackwood?" His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "The board members are waiting in the conference room for your final approval on the Chicago acquisition." "Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes," he replied, his voice carrying the authoritative tone that had become second nature. At 45, Alexander Blackwood had everything a man could want, a self-made billionaire who had clawed his way, up from middle-class roots, to become one of the most powerful men on the East Coast. His name appeared regularly in Forbes and Fortune. His dating history included supermodels, actresses, and heiresses. Yet as he stood looking out at his empire, all he felt was a profound emptiness that no amount of money or success could fill. Later that evening, as his chauffeur drove him through the exclusive Beacon Hill neighborhood to his historic mansion, Alexander scrolled through the messages on his phone. Invitations to galas, charity events, exclusive parties, all places where people would fawn over him, hanging on his every word, laughing at his jokes whether they were funny or not, all because of his money and influence. The car pulled up to the wrought iron gates of his estate, which swung open automatically. The limestone mansion, built in the 1880s and renovated to the highest standards of luxury, stood imposingly against the darkening sky. As always, it was perfectly maintained, perfectly decorated, and perfectly soulless. "Will you need me again tonight, sir?" asked Jackson, his chauffeur of 8 years. "No, thank you, Jackson. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 7. The house was quiet as he entered. Mrs. Peterson, his longtime housekeeper, greeted him with her usual efficiency. "Good evening, Mr. Blackwood. Your dinner will be ready at 8, as usual. Also, I need to inform you that Marguerite has given her notice. She'll be leaving at the end of the week." Alexander frowned. "Marguerite? The chef?" "Yes, sir. Her husband received a job offer in California. I've already begun interviewing replacements." He nodded absently. Marguerite had been with him for 2 years, 3. He couldn't remember. Staff came and went. In his life, interchangeable faces providing services he required. "I've found a promising candidate, sir," Mrs. Peterson continued. "A young woman named Emma Sullivan. Excellent references, trained at the Culinary Institute of America, worked at several high-end restaurants. She's available to start immediately." Fine, I trust your judgment, Mrs. Peterson," Alexander said dismissively. "Hire whoever you think is best." That night, as he ate his perfectly prepared meal alone at the long mahogany dining table, that could seat 20, Alexander found himself thinking about his upcoming 50th birthday. 5 decades of life, and what did he have to show for it? Money, power, property, but no one to share it with, no one who cared about the man behind the empire. His phone buzzed, a text from Veronica, the socialite he'd been casually seeing for the past few months. "Darling, don't forget the Hamilton charity ball tomorrow night. Wear your Patek Philippe. It matches my new Chanel dress. The press will be there, and Vanity Fair wants to interview us." Alexander didn't bother replying. Veronica was beautiful, sophisticated, and completely transparent in her motivations. She wanted the status of being with Alexander Blackwood, the access to his world, the mention in the society pages, just like all the others. The next morning, Alexander was reviewing documents in his home office when a soft knock interrupted him, "Come in," he called, not bothering to look up. Mrs. Peterson entered. "Sir, the new chef has arrived. I thought you might want to meet her." Alexander sighed. He rarely interacted with the household staff beyond Mrs. Peterson and his personal assistant, but he supposed a brief introduction wouldn't hurt. "Very well." A moment later, a young woman entered his office. Alexander looked up, his practiced polite greeting dying on his lips. Emma Sullivan was not what he had expected. In her mid-20s, she was dressed simply but neatly in black pants and a white chef's jacket. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, revealing a heart-shaped face with clear, honest hazel eyes. But it wasn't her appearance that caught him off guard. It was her demeanor. Unlike most people who entered his presence, she didn't seem intimidated or overly impressed. She met his gaze directly, with respect, but not subservience. "Good. Morning, Mr. Blackwood. I'm Emma Sullivan. Thank you for the opportunity to work in your home." Her voice was melodic, with a slight southern accent that suggested she wasn't from New England. "Miss Sullivan," he acknowledged, standing to shake her hand. Her grip was firm and brief. "Welcome to my home. Mrs. Peterson speaks highly of your qualifications." "Thank you, sir. I appreciate her confidence in me. I understand you have specific dietary preferences and entertaining requirements. I've reviewed the notes from your previous chef and will do my best to meet your expectations." There was something refreshing about her directness. No flattery, no excessive deference, just professional competence. "Where are you from, Miss Sullivan?" "I detect a southern accent." A small smile touched her lips. "Good ear, sir. I'm from a small town in North Carolina. Came up north for culinary school and stayed." "And what brings you to work in private service rather than a restaurant?" Emma hesitated for just a moment. "The hours are more predictable and the pay is better. I have family responsibilities back home." Alexander nodded, suddenly curious about those family responsibilities, but he caught himself. Why should he care? She was just another employee, another person providing a service in exchange for his money. "Well, I'll leave you to settle in. Mrs. Peterson will show you the kitchen and explain the household routines." "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. I look forward to preparing your meals." After she left, Alexander found himself staring at the door, puzzled by his own interest. There was something about Emma Sullivan that seemed out of place in his world of wealth and artifice. Something genuine, real. He shook his head and returned to his documents. She was just the new chef. Nothing more. But over the next few weeks, Alexander found himself increasingly aware of Emma's presence in his home. Unlike his previous chefs, who had treated meal preparation as a performance, she worked quietly and efficiently. The food she prepared was exquisite. Not showy or pretentious, but expertly crafted with attention to flavor and presentation. Alexander began to linger in the kitchen in the mornings, ostensibly to discuss the day's menu, but really to observe her. While other staff members maintained a respectful distance, Emma was politely friendly. She didn't flatter him or try to ingratiate herself. She simply did her job exceptionally well. One evening, returning late from a particularly exhausting board meeting, Alexander found the kitchen still lit. Emma was there preparing a simple meal. "You're working late, Miss Sullivan," he commented, loosening his tie. She looked up, momentarily startled. "Oh, Mr. Blackwood, Mrs. Peterson mentioned you'd be home late and hadn't eaten. I thought you might appreciate something light but satisfying." She gestured to the pan where she was sautéing what looked like mushrooms and herbs. The gesture touched him unexpectedly. His previous chef would have left precise reheating instructions for the evening staff, but Emma had stayed to prepare his meal herself. "That's very considerate of you." She shrugged lightly. "It's my job to ensure you're well fed, sir." "Please, call me Alexander. Sir makes me feel like my father." Emma smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face. "As you wish, Alexander." He sat at the kitchen island watching as she worked. "Tell me about your family in North Carolina, Emma." She glanced at him, surprise evident in her expression, but answered as she continued cooking. "My father passed when I was 14. My mother raises my younger brother and sister. Jason's 17 now, hoping for a basketball scholarship to college. Lily is 15 and smart as a whip, wants to be a doctor someday. And you support them? Emma nodded. A flash of something, pride, determination, perhaps both, crossing her face. I send home what I can. Culinary school wasn't cheap, but it gave me skills to provide them with opportunities my parents never had. As she placed the meal before him, a perfectly executed mushroom risotto with seared scallops, Alexander felt something shift inside him. When was the last time he'd spoken to someone about family, about sacrifice and responsibility, about anything real? The realization struck him with uncomfortable clarity. Emma Sullivan was the first person in years who hadn't approached him with an agenda. She wasn't seeking his power, his connections, or his wealth beyond the fair wage he paid her. She was simply herself, hard-working, dedicated, genuine. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Alexander Blackwood wanted to know more about someone else's life than his own. The autumn leaves in Boston Common created a vibrant canopy of red and gold as Alexander walked along the winding paths early one Sunday morning. This had become his new ritual over the past month, escaping his mansion for solitary walks before the city fully awakened. He found himself thinking about Emma more than he should, recalling snippets of conversation they'd shared in the kitchen when he'd lingered over breakfast or returned home early from the office. Yesterday, he'd overheard something that had been replaying in his mind ever since. He'd been passing by the laundry room when Martha, one of the housekeepers, was speaking to Mrs. Peterson. "Emma's different from the other chefs we've had," Martha had said, "so dedicated to her family. Did you know she's never even had a serious boyfriend? My cousin works at that fancy restaurant where she used to be sous chef," said Emma turned down the head chef there when he asked her out. "Apparently she's never been with anyone, saving herself for marriage, old-fashioned like that. You don't see that kind of values much nowadays." Mrs. Peterson had hushed Martha, reminding her that gossip about staff was inappropriate, but the information had lodged itself in Alexander's mind. Emma was innocent in a way he had assumed no longer existed in the modern world. It wasn't just her professional competence that set her apart. It was an intrinsic purity that seemed untouched by the cynicism and transactional nature of relationships that dominated his world. Alexander had dated countless sophisticated women who approached relationships like business mergers, evaluating potential partners based on what they could provide: status, money, connections. The idea of someone like Emma, who held on to traditional values in a world that mocked such things, fascinated him. As he circled back toward Beacon Hill, Alexander made a decision. He would increase Emma's salary. It was the logical thing to do. She was exceptional at her job and deserved to be compensated accordingly. If he felt an unusual eagerness to see her reaction to his generosity, he ignored it. That evening, he asked Emma to meet him in his study after dinner. When she entered, looking slightly nervous in her off-duty clothes, simple jeans and a blue sweater that brought out the flecks of blue in her hazel eyes, he motioned for her to sit. "Is everything all right, Alexander? Was there an issue with the meal?" she asked, perching on the edge of the chair across from his desk. "Not at all. The dinner was excellent, as always," he assured her. "I wanted to inform you that I've reviewed your performance over these first weeks, and I'm extremely satisfied with your work." "Thank you," she said, her expression relaxing slightly. "I've instructed my accountant to increase your salary by 30%, effective immediately." Emma's eyes widened. 30%? That's very generous, but I'm already being paid well above market rate." Alexander waved away her protest. "I believe in compensating excellence appropriately. You've transformed the dining experience in this house, and your dedication should be rewarded." A faint blush touched her cheeks, and she looked down momentarily before meeting his gaze again. There was something in her expression he couldn't quite read, gratitude mixed with discomfort. "I appreciate it, Alexander. My family will benefit greatly from your generosity." "Tell me more about them," he said, surprising himself with his genuine interest. "Your brother, Jason, was it? You mentioned he's hoping for a basketball scholarship." The tension in her posture eased as she spoke about her family. "Yes, he's the star of his high school team, Not quite tall enough for the big schools to come looking, but skilled. Mom sends me videos of his games. A smile brightened her face. Lily's the real academic star, though. Straight A's since forever. She wants to study medicine, but with college costs these days. Alexander leaned forward. What if I could help? I'm on the board of trustees at several universities. A word from me. No, Emma interrupted, then immediately looked contrite. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be abrupt. It's just, they need to make their own way. I help with what I can, but they need to earn their opportunities. It builds character. Her response surprised him. Most people in his life would jump at such an offer, a chance to leverage his influence. But Emma seemed almost offended by the suggestion. I respect that, he said slowly, though the offer remains open. May I ask you something? Emma ventured after a brief silence. Of course. Why did you really hire me? Mrs. Peterson mentioned your previous chef had been with you for years and was renowned in culinary circles. Alexander considered the question. Marguerite was technically excellent, but impersonal. Your cooking has soul. I can taste the difference. Soul, Emma repeated with a small smile. My grandmother would be pleased. She always said cooking without love was just following instructions. Your grandmother sounds wise. She was. She raised me until I was 8 while my parents worked multiple jobs. Everything I know about traditional cooking came from her kitchen. Emma's expression grew wistful. She passed when I was 16, but her recipes and methods are still the foundation of everything I create. Alexander found himself hungry for more stories, more glimpses into the life of this woman who viewed the world so differently from anyone else in his circle. Would you like a drink? He offered, gesturing to the bar cart. Emma hesitated. Just water, please. I don't drink alcohol. Another surprise. Alexander poured himself a scotch and a water for Emma. Religious reasons? Partly that, partly seeing what it did to my uncle. Some people can enjoy it in moderation, others can't. I decided early on I didn't need to find out which category I fall into. As they continued talking, the formal employer-employee dynamic subtly shifted. Alexander found himself sharing stories from his own childhood, growing up as the son of a college professor and a nurse in a middle-class Boston suburb, his determination to prove himself in the financial world, the early days of building his company. So you're self-made, Emma observed. I assumed with all this, she gestured around the opulent study, that you came from old money. Alexander laughed. Hardly. My father thought I was selling out when I went into finance instead of academia. He didn't live to see my success, but I think he would have been proud eventually. My mother saw the early years before she passed. She never quite understood what I did, but she was happy I could buy her a house by the ocean. And now? Who shares in your success now? Emma asked. The question hit him unexpectedly hard. Who indeed? Business associates who wanted something from him? Women attracted to his wealth and status? Friends who were really just convenient social connections? I have. Colleagues. Associates. The words sounded hollow even to his own ears. Emma seemed to sense his discomfort and gracefully changed the subject, but the question lingered in Alexander's mind long after their conversation ended, and she returned to her quarters in the staff wing. The following weeks brought subtle changes to the rhythm of the Blackwood mansion. Alexander found reasons to be home more often. He began inviting Emma to join him for dinner occasionally, ostensibly to discuss menu planning or special events, but really because he enjoyed her company. Their conversations ranged from books they'd read to places they hoped to visit someday. One evening, Alexander was hosting a small dinner party for business associates. Emma had outdone herself, preparing a menu that expertly balanced sophistication with approachability. As the guests raved about the food, he felt an unexpected surge of pride. When Veronica, who had accompanied him to the dinner as his date, made a dismissive comment about the help being replaceable, Alexander felt a flash of anger that surprised him with its intensity. Emma is an exceptionally talented chef, he said curtly. Her contributions to this household are invaluable. Veronica raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. Emma, You're on a first-name basis with your cook? How quaint. Later that night, after the guests had departed and Veronica had gone home in a huff, after he declined her invitation to spend the night at her place, Alexander found himself wandering to the kitchen. As he expected, Emma was there supervising the cleanup. Everything was perfect tonight, he told her. You impressed everyone. Thank you, she replied, a genuine smile lighting up her face. I enjoyed the challenge. He hesitated, then asked, Would you join me for a nightcap? Or in your case, perhaps some tea? Emma looked surprised but nodded. Let me just finish here. I'll bring tea to the library in 15 minutes. The library was Alexander's favorite room in the house, walls lined with books, comfortable leather chairs, a fireplace that cast a warm glow over the space. He rarely shared it with anyone, preferring to keep this sanctuary private. When Emma arrived with a tray holding a teapot and cup for herself and his preferred whiskey, she paused in the doorway, taking in the room. It's beautiful, she said softly. All these books. Have you read them all? Most of them. This was the first room I renovated when I bought the house. The rest I cared less about, but this, he gestured around, this needed to be exactly right. She placed the tray on the coffee table and settled into one of the chairs, looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen. Your guests seemed pleased with the dinner, she commented as she poured her tea. They were, especially Harrison Townsend. He asked for your card, wanted to know if you might consider catering events for his family. Emma looked up, surprised. Really? That's flattering. I told him you were exclusively employed by me, Alexander said, then paused, realizing how possessive that sounded. Of course, if you're interested in side opportunities, I wouldn't stand in your way. She studied him for a moment. Are you always this protective of your staff's talents, or am I special? The question hung in the air between them, charged with unspoken implications. Alexander felt unexpectedly vulnerable, caught between honesty and self-preservation. You're different, he finally admitted. The way you see the world, your values, your dedication to your family, it's refreshing in a world where everything seems transactional. Emma's expression grew serious. Alexander, I've noticed changes in how you interact with me lately. The salary increased these conversations, inviting me into your personal spaces like this library. She took a deep breath. I need to ask, what is this? What are your expectations? The directness of her question caught him off guard. In his world, people rarely spoke so plainly about intentions. There were games, subtle signals, strategic moves, like a chess match where neither player acknowledged they were playing. I don't have expectations, he said slowly, trying to articulate feelings he barely understood himself. I enjoy your company. You're the only person in my life who speaks to me as a person, not a bank account or a stepping stone to something else. I've heard talk among the staff, Emma said carefully, about me, about personal aspects of my life that I keep private. Alexander felt a flush of guilt, remembering the conversation he had overheard. I may have overheard something, yes. And that interests you? That I'm... She paused, clearly uncomfortable. That you've chosen to live by your convictions. That you don't compromise your values for convenience or societal pressure. Yes, that interests me very much. Emma stood, moving to the window that overlooked the garden now bathed in moonlight. I'm not a curiosity to be studied, Alexander. My personal choices are just that. Personal. They're based on my faith, my upbringing, and what I believe is right for me. He joined her at the window, careful to maintain a respectful distance. I didn't mean to objectify you or your choices. If anything, I admire them. They speak to a strength of character that's rare. When she turned to face him, their eyes met and Alexander felt something shift between them, a recognition of mutual attraction, layered with complications neither of them had words for yet. I should go, Emma said softly. It's late and this conversation is venturing into territory that could make our professional relationship difficult. As she moved toward the door, Alexander called after her. Emma, wait. When she paused, he continued, Would you consider joining me for dinner tomorrow night, not here, out somewhere? Not as employer and employee, but as friends. The invitation surprised them both. Emma hesitated, conflict evident in her expression. "I don't think that would be wise," she finally said. "Because of our working relationship?" "Partly that. And partly because I don't think friendship is really what you're looking for." With that disconcertingly perceptive observation, she left, leaving Alexander alone with his thoughts and the uncomfortable realization that she might be right. The tension in the Blackwood mansion was palpable in the days following Alexander and Emma's conversation in the library. Their interactions became carefully polite, professionally distant. Emma still prepared exquisite meals, but she no longer lingered to discuss the inspiration behind her culinary creations. Alexander found himself missing their conversations more than he cared to admit. Late one afternoon, Mrs. Peterson knocked on the door of his home office. "Mr. Blackwood, I've received a call from North Carolina. Emma's brother has been injured in a basketball game. A serious knee injury that requires surgery. She's requesting a week of leave to go home and help her family." Concern immediately eclipsed Alexander's professional demeanor. "Of course, tell her to take whatever time she needs. Is she all right?" "She's quite upset, sir. She's worried about the surgery costs and what this means for Jason's scholarship chances." Alexander frowned. "Where is she now?" "In her quarters, packing. There's a flight from Logan to Charlotte in 3 hours. Have Jackson bring the car around. I'll drive her to the airport myself." Mrs. Peterson's eyebrows rose slightly, but she nodded. "Yes, sir, I'll let her know." 20 minutes later, Alexander stood outside Emma's modest room in the staff wing, something he'd never done before. He knocked gently. Emma opened the door, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. She looked startled to see him. "Alexander, Mr. Blackwood, I was just coming to find you. I need to request emergency leave, Mrs. Peterson told me. I'm so sorry about your brother. The car is being brought around. I'll drive you to the airport." "That's not necessary," she protested. "I can take a taxi." "Emma," he said gently, "let me help. No strings attached, just let me do this small thing." After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "Thank you." In the car, Emma was quiet, staring out the window as the Boston cityscape slipped by. Alexander respected her silence until they were on the highway. "Tell me about the injury," he said softly. Emma took a shaky breath. "Torn ACL, possibly MCL as well. It happened during a game with college scouts watching." Her voice broke slightly. "Basketball was his ticket to college, without a scholarship. These injuries are serious but not career-ending with proper treatment," Alexander said. "I had a similar injury playing lacrosse in college." "Did you make a full recovery?" "Yes, with excellent doctors and physical therapy." He hesitated, then added, "Emma, I'd like to help." She stiffened. "I appreciate the ride to the airport, but this isn't about you and me. This is about a talented young man whose future shouldn't be derailed by one bad moment on a court. I have connections with the best orthopedic surgeons in the country. Let me make a call. We can't afford—" "I'm not offering charity. Think of it as an investment in potential." When she remained silent, he continued, "At least let me arrange a consultation with a specialist. After that, you and your family can decide." Emma turned to look at him, her expression a complex mixture of gratitude, hesitation, and something deeper he couldn't quite identify. "Why do you care so much?" The question caught him off guard with its directness. "Because I know what it's like to have dreams and obstacles, and because I care about the things that matter to you." The admission hung between them as they pulled up to the terminal. Alexander hadn't planned to say it, but he couldn't bring himself to regret the honesty. Emma was quiet for a long moment before speaking. "Thank you. I'll discuss it with my mother when I get home." As she moved to exit the car, Alexander impulsively reached for her hand. "Emma, I know things have been awkward between us. When you return, perhaps we could—" "I need to go," she interrupted gently, withdrawing her hand. "My flight boards soon." Alexander watched her walk away, feeling an unfamiliar ache in his chest. He had built his empire by understanding what motivated people, by seeing the angles in every situation. But with Emma, his usual instincts seemed inadequate. She operated by different rules, moved through the world with different values. The mansion felt eerily empty during Emma's absence. Alexander found himself working longer hours at the office, avoiding the silent spaces that seemed to echo with her absence. The replacement chef Mrs. Peterson arranged was technically proficient but lacked Emma's inspired touch. The meals were perfect but soulless, much like his life had been before she arrived. On the third day of Emma's absence, Alexander made a decision. Without informing her, he contacted Dr. James Farrell, the top orthopedic surgeon at Massachusetts General Hospital and a former college classmate. By that evening, arrangements had been made for Jason Sullivan to be flown to Boston for evaluation and treatment at Alexander's expense. He debated whether to call Emma but decided against it. Better to present it as a fait accompli than risk her pride causing her to refuse. Instead, he spoke with Mrs. Sullivan directly, introducing himself as Emma's employer and explaining the opportunity. To his relief, after initial hesitation, she accepted gratefully on her son's behalf. When Emma returned to Boston 5 days later, it was with her brother in tow. Alexander had arranged for Jason to stay in the mansion's guest wing before his scheduled surgery and subsequent rehabilitation. The look on Emma's face when she walked into the kitchen that first morning back was a complex mixture of gratitude, confusion, and wariness. "Why didn't you tell me what you were planning?" she asked without preamble. Alexander, who had been waiting for her, drinking coffee at the kitchen island, set down his cup. "Would you have accepted if I had?" "Probably not," she admitted after a moment. "That's why. Your brother has extraordinary potential, Emma. All I'm doing is ensuring one bad day doesn't determine the rest of his life." Emma sank onto a stool opposite him. "Do you know what Jason asked me on the flight here? He wanted to know if you were my boyfriend." A flush colored her cheeks. "He couldn't understand why else someone would do this for our family." Alexander felt his heart rate quicken. "What did you tell him?" "I told him you were a generous employer who understands the value of investing in people's potential." She looked directly at him. "Is that all this is? An investment?" "No," he admitted quietly, "though I suspect you already know that." The silence between them stretched, charged with unspoken feelings. Finally, Emma spoke. "Alexander, I don't belong in your world. The people you date are socialites and models. I'm a chef from a small town in North Carolina who sends half her paycheck home to her family. What could possibly come of whatever this is between us?" "Perhaps something real," he said simply. "Something neither of us has experienced before." Before she could respond, Jason entered the kitchen, his movements awkward with his knee brace. "Morning, sis, Mr. Blackwood." He grinned, his youth and natural cheerfulness evident despite his injury. "This place is insane. My bedroom is bigger than our whole house back home." The moment between Alexander and Emma dissolved as she turned her attention to her brother. "Did you sleep well? Are you in pain?" As Emma fussed over Jason, Alexander observed the interaction with a strange longing. This was family, genuine care and concern, untainted by ulterior motives or expectations of return. It was something his wealth had never been able to buy. Over the next few weeks, as Jason underwent surgery and began his rehabilitation, Alexander found himself increasingly integrated into the Sullivan family dynamic. Emma's mother visited for the surgery, staying for a week in another guest room. Her sister Lily came for a weekend, wide-eyed at the mansion, but surprisingly unintimidated as she peppered Alexander with questions about his business and philanthropy. The mansion, which had always felt cavernous and empty despite its opulence, came alive with their presence. Alexander found himself looking forward to family-style dinners in the kitchen rather than formal meals in the dining room. He enjoyed Jason's unfiltered enthusiasm and Lily's sharp intellect. Mrs. Sullivan treated him with a warm respect that asked nothing of him beyond his company. It was during this time that Alexander began to truly understand what had drawn him to Emma. It wasn't just her traditional values or the contrast she presented to the women he usually dated. It was her authenticity, her unwavering commitment to what mattered to her, and the way she created genuine connection wherever she went. One evening, after Jason had gone to bed and Mrs. Sullivan had returned to North Carolina, Alexander found Emma in the garden, sitting on a stone bench beneath the maple tree, its leaves a brilliant crimson in the autumn moonlight. "May I join you?" he asked. She nodded, making space beside her. For a while they sat in companionable silence, watching the breeze stir the leaves. "Jason's doctor says he's making remarkable progress," Alexander said eventually. "With continued physical therapy, he should make a full recovery. He's already talking about basketball camps next summer." "Thanks to you," Emma said softly. "I don't know how to repay what you've done for my family." "I don't want repayment, Emma. That's not why I helped." She turned to look at him, moonlight silvering her features. "Then why did you?" Alexander took a deep breath, finding himself in unfamiliar territory. In business, he was never hesitant, never uncertain. But this wasn't business. This was something far more important. "Because I'm falling in love with you," he said simply. "And loving someone means caring about what matters to them." Emma's eyes widened. "Alexander." "I know there are complications," he continued. "The differences in our backgrounds, our positions. But none of that changes how I feel." "It's not just that," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You know about my personal choices, my values. I won't compromise them, not even for you." Alexander reached for her hand, relieved when she didn't pull away. "I would never ask you to. Your integrity, your commitment to your beliefs, it's part of what I admire about you. And if those beliefs mean waiting, traditional dating, taking things slowly, then we take things slowly," he said. "I've spent my life moving fast, Emma, acquiring companies, making deals, rushing from one achievement to the next. Maybe it's time I learned the value of patience." A small smile curved her lips. The billionaire businessman willing to court a chef the old-fashioned way, that would make quite the headline. "I don't care about headlines," Alexander said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. "I care about you, about us, about seeing where this might lead if we give it a chance." Emma was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful as she gazed at their intertwined hands. "My whole life I've been careful, cautious. I've seen too many people rush into relationships for the wrong reasons and get hurt." She looked up at him. "With you, the stakes feel even higher. Because of who I am. Because of who we both are, and how different our worlds are." She gestured toward the mansion looming behind them. "This isn't my reality, Alexander. I cook in houses like this. I don't live in them." "Reality is what we make it," he argued gently. "Financial differences are just logistics. They don't define who we are as people." "Don't they, though?" Emma challenged. "Your wealth shapes how you see the world, just as my lack of it shapes how I see it. You can make problems disappear with a phone call and a check. I've spent my life figuring out how to solve problems without those resources." Alexander considered her words, recognizing their truth. "Then perhaps we can learn from each other. You can teach me what money can't solve, and I can show me what it can," she finished with a raised eyebrow. "I was going to say I could learn to see the world through your eyes," he smiled ruefully. "But I take your point." The breeze picked up, and Emma shivered slightly. Without thinking, Alexander removed his jacket and draped it around her shoulders. The gesture was small, old-fashioned, something his father might have done for his mother. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'm not asking for promises, Emma. Just a chance, dinner, real dates, time to get to know each other outside of this house and the employer-employee dynamic." He paused, then added, "And I understand if you want to find another position. It might be simpler." "Simpler, yes," she agreed. "But I love my job here. I've built something I'm proud of in that kitchen. Then stay as my chef and maybe in time as something more." Emma studied his face for a long moment, as if searching for something. Whatever she saw must have reassured her because she nodded slowly. "Dinner, real dates, no pressure or expectations, and absolutely no more grand gestures without talking to me first." Alexander smiled, feeling a weight lift from his chest. "Agreed." As they walked back toward the house, Emma still wearing his jacket despite the shortness of it on her frame, Alexander felt an unfamiliar sense of peace. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, He was pursuing something that couldn't be quantified in dollars or measured in acquisitions, something authentic and precious, something real. Winter descended on Boston, transforming the city into a glittering wonderland of snow and ice. The Blackwood Mansion, always impeccably decorated for the season, took on a magical quality with garlands adorning the grand staircase and a towering Christmas tree in the foyer. True to his word, Alexander had been courting Emma the old-fashioned way. Their first official date had been to the Boston Symphony Orchestra, followed by a quiet dinner at a small Italian restaurant, where the owner knew Alexander well enough to give them a private corner, but not so well as to make a fuss over his presence. Emma had worn a simple blue dress that Alexander later learned she had borrowed from a friend, refusing his offer to help her shop for the occasion. "I won't be the woman who lets you buy her things," she had explained gently. "Not now, not ever." Her independence both frustrated and fascinated him. Every woman he'd dated before had eagerly accepted his generosity, viewing expensive gifts as their due. Emma's refusal to be kept in any way challenged his instinct to provide, to impress with grand gestures. Instead, their courtship progressed through meaningful experiences rather than material exchanges. They visited museums on quiet weekday afternoons when Alexander could slip away from the office. They took long walks through historic neighborhoods, talking for hours about everything and nothing. They cooked together in the mansion's kitchen late at night, Emma teaching Alexander techniques his expensive culinary education had never covered. Through it all, Emma maintained her professional role in the household, impeccably executing her duties as chef. To the rest of the staff, she and Alexander presented a carefully appropriate employer-employee dynamic. Only Mrs. Peterson, with her keen observational skills, seemed to suspect the evolving relationship, though she kept her thoughts to herself. As Christmas approached, Jason returned to North Carolina, his knee healing well, his basketball future looking promising again. Before he left, he pulled Alexander aside. "Whatever's happening between you and my sister," he said with the directness of youth, "just know that she's the best person I know. She's given up a lot for our family." "I know," Alexander replied, simply. Jason studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Good. Because if you hurt her, I don't care how rich you are, I'll find a way to make you regret it." Alexander suppressed a smile at the teenager's protective instinct. Understood. The holiday season brought a break in their routine. Emma returned to North Carolina to spend Christmas with her family, declining Alexander's offer to fly them all to his vacation home in Aspen. "Some traditions shouldn't be changed," she explained. "Christmas at home is one of them." The 2 weeks of her absence felt interminable to Alexander. He found himself checking his phone constantly for her messages, rearranging his schedule to be available when she might call. The mansion, decorated with expensive seasonal trimmings, felt hollow without her presence. It was during this separation that Alexander confronted the depth of his feelings. This wasn't a passing fascination with Emma's purity or an attraction born of novelty. What he felt was deeper, more profound than anything he'd experienced before. He was in love with her strength, her values, her unwavering sense of self. When Emma returned in early January, something had shifted between them. Their careful dance of attraction and restraint gave way to a more comfortable acknowledgement of their feelings. They still maintained professional boundaries during working hours, but evenings often found them together in the library or walking through the snow-covered garden. One night, as they sat before the fire in the library, Emma brought up the subject they'd both been delicately avoiding. "Alexander, we need to talk about the future. About us." He felt a tightening in his chest. "That sounds ominous." She smiled softly. "Not ominous, just necessary. We've been in this in-between state for months now. Not quite employer-employee anymore, but not a real couple," he supplied, when she trailed off. "Yes, and I think we both know why." Alexander sighed, setting aside his book. "The differences in our positions, our backgrounds. Partly that, but also because I think you've been waiting for me to change, to adapt to your world." "That's not true," he protested. "Isn't it?" Emma challenged gently. You've been patient, incredibly so, but I see the way you look at me sometimes, especially when we're out among your peers, like you're waiting for me to transform into someone who belongs in that world. Alexander wanted to deny it, but her insight struck uncomfortably close to the truth. He had been unconsciously waiting for Emma to become more like the women he was accustomed to dating, confident in luxury settings, familiar with the unspoken social codes of wealth, comfortable being adorned with expensive things. "I don't want you to change," he said finally. "Your authenticity is what drew me to you. But you also don't know how to integrate who I am into your life. The galas, the business functions, the social obligations. I'll always be the chef who caught the billionaire's eye. The curiosity. Is that how you see yourself? As a curiosity?" Emma's expression softened. "No, but it's how others will see me, and eventually that will affect how you see me too." "You don't give me enough credit," Alexander said, an edge of frustration in his voice. "I know who you are, Emma. I know what matters to you. And it's not what others think that concerns me. It's whether you could ever truly be happy in my world." "Could you be happy in mine?" she countered. The question hung between them. Alexander tried to imagine himself living a simpler life, giving up the trappings of wealth he'd worked so hard to acquire, the influence he wielded, the complex business empire he'd built. "I don't know," he admitted honestly. "I've never tried." Emma nodded, as if his answer confirmed something she'd suspected. "That's my point. We're asking each other to leap into the unknown without a safety net. Isn't that what love is?" Alexander asked. "Taking that leap together?" "Maybe. But love also needs a foundation to build on. Common ground." Emma took a deep breath. "I love you, Alexander. I think I have almost from the beginning, though I fought it. But loving someone doesn't automatically solve the practical realities of bringing two different worlds together." His heart soared at her declaration, even as her cautionary words registered. "You love me?" A small smile touched her lips. "Is that really what you took from everything I just said?" "It's the most important part," he replied, moving to sit beside her and taking her hands in his. "Emma, I love you too. Everything else, we can figure it out together." She looked down at their joined hands. "It's not that simple." "It can be," he insisted. "We're making it more complicated than it needs to be." Emma shook her head. "You're used to obstacles disappearing when you throw money at them. This isn't like that." The truth of her words stung. Alexander pulled back slightly, studying her face. "Is this about your values? Your decision to wait until marriage?" "That's part of it," she acknowledged. "But it's more than that. It's about whether what's between us is real and lasting, or whether we're both in love with idealized versions of each other. You as the man who sees me for who I am, not what I can offer. Me as the woman who reminds you of authenticity in a world of artifice." The insight took Alexander's breath away. Emma had articulated something he'd been unable to pin down himself, the fear that their attraction was based on what they represented to each other, rather than who they truly were. "Then we need to find out," he said finally. "Not by guessing or theorizing, but by living, by taking that leap." Emma looked uncertain. "What are you suggesting?" Alexander took a deep breath, suddenly clear about what he needed to do. "I'm suggesting we break down the walls between our worlds. Not by you adapting to mine or me to yours, but by creating something new together." Over the next weeks, Alexander put his plan into action. He began by restructuring his work schedule, delegating more responsibilities to his executive team to free up time. The workaholic who had built an empire through relentless drive found himself prioritizing evenings with Emma over late meetings, weekends exploring her interests over networking events. He invited her family to Boston for Jason's follow-up appointments, making a point of spending time with them outside the mansion, taking them to local restaurants Emma loved, community, events and neighborhood spots that tourist guides overlooked. More significantly, he accepted Emma's invitation to visit her hometown, a small, unassuming place where everyone knew everyone else's business, and his wealth meant little compared to his character. He stayed in her mother's modest home, sleeping on a pull-out sofa and helping with household chores. He attended her family's church, listened to stories about Emma's childhood, and witnessed firsthand the community bonds that had shaped her values. For her part, Emma made efforts to understand Alexander's world beyond its glossy surface. She asked thoughtful questions about his business decisions, offering perspectives he'd never considered. She accompanied him to select social functions, navigating complex social hierarchies with quiet dignity rather than attempting to mimic the behavior of his usual social circle. One evening, returning from a charity gala where Emma had charmed several of Boston's most influential philanthropists with her genuine interest in their causes, Alexander broached the subject they'd been circling. "Move in with me," he said, as they sat in the back of his car. Emma raised an eyebrow. "Into the staff quarters?" "No," he chuckled. "Into the mansion proper, as my partner, not my employee." She was quiet for a long moment. "You know my values haven't changed. Living together before marriage isn't something I'm comfortable with." "I'm not asking you to share my bedroom," Alexander clarified. "The house has 23 rooms. You could have your own suite, your own space. But I want us to share a home, to build a life together without the employer-employee dynamic complicating things." "And my job? I love being your chef, but if I'm your partner, we'll hire someone else for the household, and if you want to continue working, we'll find another outlet for your talents. Perhaps that cooking school for underprivileged youth you've talked about starting." Emma looked out the window at the passing city lights. "You've thought this through?" "I have. But there's more." Alexander took her hand. "This is just the first step. I don't want a temporary arrangement, Emma. I want forever with you." Her eyes widened. "Alexander." "I'm not proposing." "Not yet," he clarified. "When I do, it won't be in the back of a car after a charity event. It will be special, meaningful. But I want you to know that's where I see us heading, if you feel the same." Emma's expression softened as she squeezed his hand. "I do. But I need to know something first." She took a deep breath. "Is this us, about who I am, or what I represent to you?" The question cut to the heart of the doubt that had lingered between them. Alexander considered it carefully before responding. "When I first became interested in you, I was attracted to what you represented: authenticity, purity, values that seemed rare and precious in my world. But that was just the beginning." He turned to face her fully. "I fell in love with you, Emma Sullivan, your kindness, your strength, your unwavering sense of self, the way you challenge me to be better, the way you see me, not as a billionaire or a power broker, but as a man trying to find meaning beyond success." Tears glistened in Emma's eyes. "That's what I needed to hear. Because I didn't fall in love with Alexander Blackwood, billionaire. I fell in love with the man who sits in his library reading poetry until midnight, who drove 8 hours to a high school basketball game to see my brother play, who looks at me like I'm the most precious thing he's ever seen." "You are," he said simply. 3 months later, on a perfect spring evening, Alexander brought Emma to the Boston Public Garden, to a secluded spot beneath a flowering cherry tree. There, with no audience but the stars above, he knelt on one knee and offered her not a massive diamond that would have overwhelmed her slender hand, but his grandmother's ring, a simple, elegant sapphire that matched the blue of the lake behind them. "Emma Sullivan, you've shown me what true wealth looks like. It's not in bank accounts or real estate portfolios. It's in genuine connection, in being seen and known for who you truly are. I want to spend the rest of my life building that kind of wealth with you. Will you marry me?" Emma's eyes shone with tears as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Alexander felt a sense of completeness he'd never known before. The man who had everything had finally found the one thing his money couldn't buy, a love based not on what he could provide, but on who he truly was. 6 months later, they were married in a ceremony that blended their two worlds, held in the gardens of the Blackwood mansion, but infused with the warmth and traditions of Emma's family. Jason, fully recovered and headed to college on a basketball scholarship, served as a groomsman. Lily, accepted to pre-med at Boston University with a full academic scholarship, earned entirely on her own merit, as Emma had insisted, was a bridesmaid. After the celebration, as guests departed and the evening quieted, Alexander found Emma standing in the kitchen, absent-mindedly running her fingers over the countertop where they had first truly begun to know each other. Having second thoughts about the honeymoon? He teased, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. She leaned back against him, her wedding ring catching the light. Not at all. Just thinking about how far we've come, from employer and employee to husband and wife. The best investment I ever made was hiring you, Alexander murmured against her hair. Emma turned in his arms, her expression suddenly serious. I need you to know something. What happens between us tonight and for the rest of our lives, it was never about being pure or untouched. It was about waiting for the right person, the right commitment. About knowing my own worth. Alexander brushed a strand of hair from her face. I know, and I hope you know that I don't see your choice as some prize I've won or possession I've claimed. I see it as the honor it is that you chose to share that part of yourself with me when you could have chosen anyone. Not anyone, she corrected softly. Only someone who saw me, really saw me, for everything I am. As they left the kitchen, hands intertwined, Alexander reflected on the journey that had brought them here. He had spent his life assigning value to things, properties, companies, assets. But Emma had taught him the true worth of things that couldn't be quantified: integrity, authenticity, love freely given. In the end, the billionaire who could buy anything discovered that the most valuable treasures were those freely given from the heart. And the young woman who had guarded her heart so carefully found that true love wasn't about finding someone perfect, but someone whose imperfections complemented her own. Together, they had built a bridge between two worlds, creating something new and beautiful in the space between. Not his world or hers, but theirs, founded on respect, understanding, and a love that saw beyond surface differences to the truth of who they were. And that, they both knew, was the greatest wealth of all. Fim da Historia. Dear listeners, we hope you've been moved by the journey of Emma and Alexander, a tale of two worlds colliding and the transformative power of authentic love. If this story touched your heart, remember to subscribe to our channel for more emotionally rich narratives that explore life's complexities. Click the like button if you enjoyed this exploration of value, worth, and true connection. We've created a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it by clicking on the link to your left. Every day we bring you unique stories that delve into the human experience in all its beauty and challenge. What was your favorite moment?